Here. All right, so let's get going. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being with us here this morning, this afternoon, this evening, depending on where you are. My name is Phil Bowers. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager here at Grandstream. Today's webinar is pretty much all about our GXP1700 series. Our GXP1700 series is a brand new series of IP phones that we launched just last week, actually, 2 weeks ago, excuse me. No, it was last week. It was a week ago today. And these are our first ever series of mid-range IP phones. And as we go through, I'll give you an idea of when we talk about mid-range IP phones, who are we talking about? Who are we really targeting with this specific product? One of the other things that you'll notice during the webinar, towards the end of the webinar is, and you may have noticed this on our website, we have slightly repositioned our other GXP IP phones, basically positioning them more along the lines of how they are used rather than who used them. So we're no longer calling our phones small business or enterprise IP phones. We're calling them basic IP phones and high-end IP phones. And we will get to that later. I will break that all down for you. Today's webinar should be no longer than 30 minutes or so. I have about 25 slides here. Again, pretty much to introduce the GXP1700 series to you, tell you about what makes it so great, what makes it stand out, why we came out with it, and then we'll wrap up by just talking about our GXP IP phones in general. If you do have any questions, feel free to type them over to me through the chat in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and I will address the questions as they come in, and for anything we can't get to, we'll have a question and answer period at the end. All right, so always like to start off with a little bit of a refresher or an introduction into Grandstream for those of you that might not be familiar with us, might be new to us, etc. So we were founded back in 2002. One of the great things about Grandstream is that we are truly one of the original manufacturers in the SIP marketplace. We were making SIP devices before pretty much anyone else in the world was making, or most of the companies that you see on the market now were making SIP devices. We started back in 2002 with 1 and 2 line IP phones, 1 and 2 line analog telephone adapters, and over the years we have really grown into a full business communication solutions provider. The slide says we have over 40 products. We actually have, to my count, anywhere between 55 and 60 products right now. Really ranges the entire end of the business communications endpoint spectrum. I'll go over that more in depth on the next slide. We do primarily serve the small to medium-sized business marketplace. One thing it does not say on here, which it should, is that we also do a lot in the enterprise space. We do tons of these GXP IP phones all over the world in enterprises, some of the biggest enterprises in the world. We have a PBX that's great for enterprises. We make a variety of video conferencing devices that are great for enterprises as well as your traditional networking equipment, gateways, ATAs, etc. We are headquartered here in Boston, Massachusetts, here in the United States, which is where I'm talking to you from today. If anyone's ever in town, and you know Boston, we are pretty much right next to Fenway Park, 126 Brookline Avenue. Feel free to stop by and see us. We do have a variety of other offices throughout the world. We believe currently have 11 different offices. They're all not listed here. But these various other offices give us the ability to offer local support, local stocking options to our customers around the world. Support in your local time zone, in your local language, in your local region. All right, so just to kind of wrap up the introduction here, I mentioned this earlier, we really do play on every end of the IP unified communications spectrum. We're best known for our IP phones, which is obviously the main thing we're here to talk about today, but as you see, and as I'm sure many of you know, we really do provide a wide range of product lines, everything. We break it up here on the slide into VoIP and surveillance, but I tend to like to think of it all more as a unified communication solution. Everything from the back end to the endpoints that you're going to need, IP PBXs, gateways, ATAs, to your IP phones, a whole variety of IP phones, video conferencing systems, video surveillance equipment as well. And I'm sure many of you noticed we just got into the networking industry, the Wi-Fi marketplace with our first ever Wi-Fi access point, and that's going to be a new product line that we're really going to be developing over the next couple of years. All right, so let's get into what we're here to talk about today. the GXP1700 series of mid-range IP phones. These are our first ever series of mid-range IP phones, and I would actually also say that, at least from my little bit of initial research here, maybe one of the only truly branded mid-range IP phone series on the market. You see phones from other manufacturers that might kind of give off the impression that they're mid-range, but these are the first ones that I've seen actually positioned as mid-range IP phones. So 3 different models in this GXP1700 series. We have our GXP1780 and GXP782 on the left. Both of those devices support 8 lines and 4 SIP accounts, and the GXP1782 offers Gigabit ports. That's something I'll come back to. So one, the differentiation of the 1782 is it's the only model in this 1700 series with Gigabit ports. And then we have our GXP1760 over there on the right. That phone supports 6 lines, 3 SIP accounts, and has standard 10, 100 megabit per second ports, just like the 1780. So I'm going to break down each one of these devices for you, features, functionality, whatnot, over the next couple of slides. But before we do that, I want to kind of give an indication of, when we talk about mid-range IP phones, what exactly are we talking about? And so the great thing about these phones and the way that we're positioning them is that they offer a set of mid-range features and mid-range capacity that a business can grow with. A young business, a growing business can grow with. But the phones offer really high-end modern design, and they're able to do all of that by offering an entry-level price. So basically what you're getting is a really attractive, as you probably just saw on the last slide, and I'll break down the design for you more. You're getting a really attractive phone, a phone with a high-end design that offers mid-range capacity that a business can grow with, and also a design that a business can grow with. And it comes in at an entry-level price that they need right now to fit into their budget, to allow them to, continue to grow without having to sink a lot of money into a communication system. So again, high-end modern design with mid-range capacity at a near entry-level price, ideal for growing businesses, small to medium-sized businesses, startups, or any business that's really looking to, put in a quality phone system without putting in, with high-end design and some great features, some more high-end features without investing a ton of money in it. So that's really who these mid-range IP phones are for. Again, you're going to hear the term growing businesses throughout. This is kind of the customer profile that we have come up with for this series of IP phones. Again, growing businesses who really want a high-end, modern, sleek-looking design phone with capacity that will be great for them now and something they can grow into without spending a lot of money on it. The GXP1700 series are great phones for that purpose. So to get back into the technical specs of these devices, we'll start off here with the GXP1780 and GXP1782. Again, these are 8-line phones with 4 SIP accounts. So the 1780 and 1782 both offer 8 lines and 4 SIP accounts. You will see the 4 line keys right there to the left of the screen. One of the other great things about these devices are the digital BLF keys. They're actually the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Grandstream phones to offer digital BLF speed dial keys, which allow you to turn those line keys on either side of the phone into the 8 line keys total into digital BLF speed dial keys. I'll come back to that later on and talk about that in terms of both phones. All GXP1700 series phones do offer those digital BLF speed dial keys. You see the new design, which I'm going to come back to. The GXP1782, as I mentioned, supports Gigabit ports. All GXP1700 series models do offer PoE. We talked about the BLF speed dial, digital BLF speed dial. Again, these are 1780, 1782 are 8 lines, which, 1780, you see the 8 in the model name. That's pretty much where that comes from. It tells you the amount of lines that it has. Both of these models and all 1700 series models, full support for HD audio, both the G722 codec and I believe Opus as well. These models also do have a USB port, which is something that's not mentioned here on this slide that we'll come back to. It is a 200 by 80 pixel backlit LCD display. As you can see from the picture, it's not a full color, but it is a backlit display. And one of the things that I often mention in our webinars is you're going to see BroadSoft and Metaswitch logos on this slide and the next slide with pending next to it. The reason why we like to put BroadSoft and Metaswitch logos on these slides is just because we find that those are the two most prominent platforms, soft switch platforms, that our customers, resellers, and service providers sell into or support. They're not, by no means are these the only soft switch platforms or similar platforms that we support. You can go to our website and go to the, what is it, I believe it's company and partners, or actually right next to the company drop-down menu, there's a whole section for partners where you can see all the other soft switch, PBX service providers. We just put BroadSoft and Metaswitch because we find them to be kind of the two most prominent that our channel works with. And as always, we will be certifying these phones with both of those. That is ongoing, or has already started and should begin soon. So that's the 1780, 1782. I'm going to come back and break down a lot of these features for you more in depth. This is just kind of a basic introduction here on this slide. So again, 1780, 1782, both 8 lines, phones with support for 4 SIP accounts, and 32 digital Blf Speed Dial keys. 1782 adds the gigabit ports. All right, GXP 1760, this is, I guess we can say this is the lower end GXP 1700 series model. Pretty much exactly the same specs as the 1780, 1782. It's the same exact size of the phone. Really, the physical size of the phone. Really the only difference here is the 1760, you see the 6 in the model name. It supports 6 lines, 3 SIP accounts, and offers 24 digital BLF keys, whereas the 1780, 1782 both offer 32 digital BLF Speed Dial keys. And again, I will break that down for you. 5-way conferencing, saw a question about the 5-way conferencing. We actually build support for at least 3-way voice conferencing into all of our IP phones, including our basic IP phones. The GXP 1700 series and most, if not all, GXP 2100 series will support at least 5-way conferencing. It's basically a little conference bridge that's built into the phone itself. So there's nothing required for it. All you need really is VoIP or SIP service to be able to get that up, and the phone there is the one that actually combines and creates the conference. Automated provisioning, which we will talk about. One thing I should point out here, you see a gigabit icon in the bottom left. That is a mistake. The GXP 1760 does not have a gigabit port. It has your standard 10/100 megabit per second ports, just like the 1780, and as I mentioned, the 1782's got that gigabit port. So again, 6-line phones, support for 3-way conferencing, support for 5-way conferencing, support for up to 3 SIP accounts, and the 24 programmable keys, the 24 digitally programmable BLF Speed Dial keys, which are the 6-line keys, the 3 on either side of the screen, and as I mentioned, I'll come back to that later on. So the first thing that you've probably kind of taken a step back now and looking more at the feature set and what these guys do and why they're so great, the first thing you notice is that this looks pretty different than a lot of other Grandstream phones do. And yes, that's absolutely true. You know, we kind of took not a redo, but we really, put a lot of emphasis on this device in the design of it. Not just the sleek look and feel of it, which as you can see is really a little bit of an overhaul from the design of our other phones. We personally think that this is one of the more attractive phones that we offered, which is why we're actually excited to offer it as a mid-range phone. Again, a really high-end, sleek-looking device that has that mid-range capacity, but that comes in at basically an entry-level price point. So again, like we do with a lot of other things, making really high-end equipment available to businesses and to users throughout the world at a price point that basically was not previously attainable or available elsewhere on the market. All right, so just aside from the look of it, which, you see the shiny glass black faceplate around the screen of the phone, We've also added new rectangular silver numerical keys, a little bit of a change from our current design, just to, again, give it a little bit more of a sleeker look, feel, and design to it. In addition to those two things, the device also features, just as actually pretty much all of our IP phones that we've come out in the last 2 or 3 years do, an ergonomically designed handset and an ergonomically designed keypad placement to enable you to easily move around, press buttons without, potentially pressing other buttons, to easily hold the handset in your, in your hand, under your shoulder like so many of us do, etc. In terms of the feature keys, pretty much a lot of what you're used to from our other phones. We really haven't switched this up all too much at all. You see the line keys. This is the 1780 and 82 you see in the picture, so it's got 8 line keys because it supports 8 lines, 4 on either side of the screen. You've got 4 soft keys right down there below the screen. And as I mentioned, those line keys on either side of the screen, which I will show you on the next slide, double as digitally programmable Blf Speed Dial keys. And then down there in the lower right-hand section, you've got, I believe it's almost the same buttons and icons that we use on our GXP1700 series phones, where you've got up there a phone book, you've got a conference, or excuse me, you've got the top button there is the little book, phone book, then you got transfer right below it, then you got a conference button, then you got a headset, then you got a mute, and then over to the left you got volume up, volume down, speakerphone, initiate a call, and your directional key. So pretty much, operated the same way, with the same icons, the same functions as most of our other Grandstream phones, specifically the GXP1600 series. All right, so I mentioned the digitally programmable Blf Speed Dial keys. Again, these are the third, fourth, and fifth Grandstream phones to offer this feature. We had gotten feedback for a couple of years that this was a very useful and desirable feature from many of our resellers and service providers that we work with, so we've built it in. Our GXP2135 and GXP2170 are 2 of our high-end IP phones, which came out with about a year ago, were the first Grandstream devices to offer digital Blf Speed Dial keys, and now we have it here with the GXP1700 series. The picture you see a GXP1780 or 1782, so it's got 8 lines. You see the 4 line keys on either side, and you're going to get 4 pages on all of the 1700 series devices, 4 pages for this digital Blf Speed Dial functionality. So if you do the math there with the 1780 and 1782, you get 8 on a page times 4 pages, 32 total. And with the 1760 down there on the bottom, you get 6 per page because it obviously supports 6 lines, so it has 6 line keys times 4 pages for a total of 24 digital Blf Speed Dial keys. A couple of questions. Can the Blf be used for shared line appearances? Yes, it can. Do the Blf lights indicate presence? Yes, they do. As you can kind of see in the picture here, we've got, just in this example, we've got 3 line keys lit up. You see 2 with green and 1 with red, and as we know, green means the person's available, and red means that they're on the phone or that they are not available. Obviously, just as all of our IP phones do, these do support voicemail. You would access your voicemail here just by dialing into the voicemail. There's not a dedicated button for it. There's another question that we got here about the USB port. And the USB port I will get to. Basically, it's really just for expandable memory. Going forward, we're planning to build in some additional functionality for that. But the USB is great for saving call recordings, for example. All right, so in terms of headset compatibility, these phones support, it's obviously got an RJ9 headset jack, so it will be compatible with any RJ9 headset. We also do have full support for EHS Plantronics headsets. The reason why we say EHS, so for those of you that don't know, EHS stands for electronic hook switch support. those are specific types of headsets that actually allow you to essentially wirelessly communicate with the phone. Just use the headset to answer calls, to end calls, etc. Great for call centers, great for receptionists or anybody on the phone. We usually get the question of why do we say EHS for Plantronics headsets. From our side, in our testing, they have the highest EHS standard, and so we test against their EHS standard. Between us here, we've been working with a couple other headset manufacturers. Sennheiser, the one that comes to mind first, to announce compatibility with not only their EHS headsets, but with pretty much their full range of headsets. We do have a list on our website of supported and tested headsets in addition to just the Plantronics EHS ones. You can find that, I believe it's listed as an FAQ in our FAQ section on our website, or honestly the easiest way to do it is to just go on our website, chat us, and ask us for that list of supported headsets. So again, EHS Plantronics headsets, you probably find that it'll work with EHS headsets from any other manufacturer, or you obviously have the RJ9 headset jack right on the back. In terms of auxiliary ports, obviously we talked about the top two items here earlier. 1782 has the dual gigabit ports, where the 1780 and the 1760 have your dual 100 megabit per second ports. All three models offer USB. They all have the USB port in it, which, as I mentioned, is really just for expandable memory. Call recordings, for example. One of the great features you'll get with using any of our IP phones with our UCM series of PBXs is you can actually basically create one-touch call recording where you can just have the user press a button, a soft key on the phone to turn on and off call recordings, and in that case, you can configure those call recordings to just be saved to a USB on the phone, or obviously back to the UCM centrally so it can be accessed or downloaded from anywhere. And we just talked about the EHS support for Plantronics headsets and that RJ9 headset jack. In terms of provisioning, really all the same provisioning methods are supported by these phones as all of our other Grandstream IP phones, just to make them quick and easy to provision and to give you a lot of different options. Obviously we like to promote use with our own series of PBXs, although obviously our IP phones are open source IP phones and they will be supported by any SIP service provider, PBX, soft switch provider, etc. that's out there. With our UCM series of IP PBXs, for those of you maybe not familiar with it, we do have a feature built into it called Zero Config. Zero Config is able to basically allow the UCM to go auto-discover and then automatically configure up to thousands of Grandstream devices at a time. You can provide the UCM with a set of extension ranges if you wish, or some general rules, or you can allow it to basically create each device with by creating its own extensions, its own extension ranges, other rules, etc. And so if you're doing with, so basically our UCM series does support Zero Config with the 1700 series, just like it supports Zero Config with every other Grandstream product. One thing, just while we're talking about it, I always like to mention is that Zero Config is only for Grandstream products. Our UCM series of PBXs will support and will be supported by any SIP device out there. The Zero Config functionality we have just optimized and built for our own devices. Obviously, TRO69 mass provisioning is supported, as well as AES encrypted XML config files. Those of you that know us, this is nothing new. You've seen these methods. You're familiar with these methods, as well as firmware upgrade via TFTP, HTTP, and HTTPS. One thing that's not mentioned on this provisioning slide, which I always like to mention, is that we do offer, through our distribution channels, a service that we call GAPS. It stands for Grandstream Automatic Provisioning Service. And basically what it is it's a point-to-point, it's a server that we've built and that we own, that we have optimized to be able to configure mass amounts of Grandstream devices. These can be provisioned in the warehouse. They can be provisioned on in the field by just pressing or pointing the endpoints back to our server. Again, this is called Grandstream Automatic Provisioning Service, or GAPS, G-A-P-S for short. If you're interested in this, contact your Grandstream your Grandstream distributor. If your Grandstream distributor may not be using GAPs or might not be familiar with it, tell them that they can come talk to us and we'll get them set up with GAPs. All right, just to wrap up here, I've got about 5 minutes left, so we'll begin to wrap up the webinar here pretty soon. For those of you that might be looking for something more in-depth, how to set them up, a web user interface tour, you can actually join us. I believe it's tomorrow. We have a UCM series training webinar going on in which we will also cover configuring, full configuration and provisioning of IP phones. So just to wrap up real quickly here, talked about the UCM series of IP PBXs. Not only are they great for, they're great, one of the best on-premise IP PBXs in the world, offering, full unified communication features, voice support, video support, data support, and mobility support for just a one-time upfront purchase price with no licensing fees at any point in time. But in addition to that, when you're talking specifically about Grandstream phones, there's a couple of great features that we're able to offer through our UCM, supported on our IP phones. We talked about zero config. I kind of talked about one-touch call recording. That's where you give a phone the ability to just turn on and off call recording by just pressing a button on the phone. Our UCM, as well as a lot of other IP PBXs as well, but do also offer features like call detail records, call queues, auto attendance, IVRs, music on hold, support for LDAP phone books, conference bridges, remote extension, VLF, etc. All right, so now over the next couple of slides here, just going to wrap up. And one of the things I mentioned earlier in the webinar is that one of the things that we've released, and you may have noticed on our website, along with these new GXP IP phones, the new GXP1700 series IP phones, is that we have slightly repositioned the models that we currently have in our portfolio. So currently, for those of you that know us, and for those of you that don't, I guess bear with me here for a second, you see now what we're calling the devices here. So we now, instead of calling our GXP1600 series small business IP phones, we are calling them basic IP phones. That's how they've been positioned. For our GXP2100 series IP phones, instead of calling them enterprise IP phones, we're now calling them high-end IP phones. And obviously we talked about the mid-range IP phones. And so the reason why we're doing this, and if you are a Grandstream partner, reseller, service provider, what have you, I should say that our website's been set up to automatically redirect all the old links to the new links, so you don't have to change anything at all on your website or any of your links to our website. So the reason why we've done this, this slight repositioning, slight adjustment, is really just to allow the phones to be, I don't want to say more easily understood, but what we're doing here is positioning them more on how they are used rather than who uses them. And from my research and from what I've seen and kind of what I've learned, that's much more in tune with how the market buys phones. So the example I'll give is we currently have, we currently called our GXP1600 series small business IP phones. But we were selling as many of those small business IP phones into larger enterprises and to more high-end uses than anything else, or as we were into small to medium-sized businesses. And that's just because, the way that people use IP phones has more to do with where they're, or how they're being used rather than who or where they are being used. And then the other example I'll give you here is, we previously called the 2100 series our enterprise IP phones. Now we're calling them our high-end IP phones because we would see as many of those enterprise IP phones, quote-unquote, used in small to medium-sized businesses or retail locations as in enterprises. So it really has more to do with the requirements of the user, how often they're going to be on the phone, and what features, basically what features they need access to. Do they just need the ability to access, they just need access to VoIP, so they need a basic phone that they can make and receive calls? Do they want more of a mid-range phone that is a little bit cheaper that they can grow with and has a great design? Or do they want a high-end IP phone which allows them to get more done, handle more calls, keep in touch with more people, basically a phone designed for somebody who's often on the phone and wants to integrate with a lot of other devices? So just to wrap this up here, and I know there's some questions in the chat, and I will get to those. I have about 3 slides left here, and then I will code through all the questions that came in. So again, just to kind of, I'm a marketing guy, so I like to kind of hammer these points home and really make sure that everybody understands the positioning and the way that we're discussing and talking about and promoting these phones. So again, our GXP1700 series, previously our small business IP phones, are now, we now are calling them our basic IP phones. These are simple, easy to use IP phones for areas that need access to VoIP but do not require advanced features. And I'll give you some examples on the next slide of some areas we see that are heavy users of basic IP phones. So these devices basically, they're simple, easy to use, they offer basic VoIP features, and they come in at an entry-level price point, again, for people that need access to VoIP or areas that need access to VoIP, but really just need to make and receive calls. They don't need access to any high-end features. So in terms of who's using basic IP phones, you see some of the popular ones here, and this is what I mean. The phones are more being bought by the industry in terms of where or how they're being used rather than who is using them. We see basic IP phones used in lobbies, in hotels, in homes, in warehouses, in schools, in offices of all sizes, small to medium-sized businesses up to enterprises, service industry, and retail shops, for example. So really, pretty much almost anybody has a use for a basic IP phone in an area where they just need to make and receive calls. They don't need high-end features. They just need the ability to access VoIP. So now we move up to the mid-range IP phones, which we pretty much talked about already. And again, these are really built for growing businesses. They offer a really sleek, high-end, modern design with a mid-range capacity at a near entry-level price. Great for businesses that want a great-looking phone with mid-range features that are going to be great for them now and in the future, but that comes in at a price that is great for them now, that near entry-level price. And then we have our high-end IP phones. Again, really designed for people that are often on the phone they give you the ability, as you see here, to get more done, handle more calls, keep in touch with more people. Really designed for people often on the phone who need access to those advanced telephony features, high-end line support, usability options like the ability to integrate mobile devices. So state-of-the-art features, high-end capacity, mobile device integration from those high-end IP phones. And just to kind of break the series down for you, here is another slide. Again, for more basic uses, we have the 1600 series for mid-range uses, for growing businesses, small to medium-sized businesses, businesses on a budget, we have the 1700 series, and for high-end use, anyone often on the phone or who needs those high-end features, we have our GXP2100 series. All right, so that wraps up what I wanted to cover here for the webinar. I know there's some questions, so